into it here. Over the weekend, LSU had a strong visitor list. What'd you hear about what went on?
Yeah, I thought it was a good weekend, and LSU had a couple of commitments back on campus, and Tyler Miller, one of the best offensive linemen in the country, and C.J. Ross, one of the best linebackers in the country. And they were there and helping recruit for LSU, which is always a good thing to have some commits around. And to get those guys back on campus, it was big. You know, Tyler Miller's from Mississippi, and LSU's going to have to keep an eye on the in-state schools there until the end, but he came to campus and reaffirmed things from what we've heard with LSU, which is a great sign for Brad Davis. You know, he continues to be one of the top, if not the top recruiter on the staff in terms of positionally. And then you've got C.J. Ross, who is a staple for Blake Baker in that linebacker room for the future and has emerged as one of the best linebackers in the country. I mean, his track times I think around 10.4, 10.5 in the 100-meter plus his production at Houston North Shore. He's a really high upside guy that Blake Baker identified early on. So getting those two back was big, and then they had a bunch of targets and at different positions across the board, a couple of safeties and 5-star Jonah Williams as well as 4-star CJ Jim Coyley. And then you had cornerbacks like Cade Phillips on campus, Onis Kananbani, from South Carolina by way of Georgia. And those are guys that Corey Raymond has really kept a close eye on throughout their recruitments. And then they had Mario Nash on campus, a 4-star offensive tackle who named LSU right at the top, if not the top school, coming off of his official visit. And he's going to take his his recruitment into the fall. So that's one to watch for LSU without a doubt. They've done some good work there. And then C.J. Wiley, the son of Chuck Wiley, was on campus. The 4-star wide receiver out of Georgia is really turning into one of the more intriguing recruiting battles here down the stretch in his recruitment before he announces a decision next week. He's set to go to Florida State this weekend. He's done his official visit to Georgia. There's some people that have thought for a while that he'll be tough to pull out of Georgia, and of course he will be. But the Dogs are having to sweat this one for sure with the way LSU and Florida State are coming at him. And I think they're going to sit down and you know, really assess everything with his recruitment and go from there. So good weekend overall. LSU's also had Carius Kern, a 4-star offensive lineman, who will announce his decision on Thursday, and the Tigers sit in a good spot there. So pretty solid weekend overall.
Number 1 overall player in Arkansas, Carius Kern, and we saw him make a couple of visits to Baton Rouge. Last time he was here, just after he left, he decommitted. Now he makes a visit, and it looks, at least the images and everything on social media, looks as if the visit couldn't have gone any better. You mentioned the commitment is on the horizon. How are we feeling on this?
I mean, I feel pretty good right now. I mean, Shea Dixon and I have been checking around, and we've had our on-3 RPM picks in for Carius Kern since that decommitment. And, you know, LSU was trending behind the scenes on that one for quite some time. And we kind of thought, okay, maybe it would just be a flip and it would happen right away. But he opted to kind of take his time. He's got an interesting family dynamic. He's had to, we'll just put it like this, he's had to grow up very, very fast, far faster than guys his age should. And he's really just a very mature young man who also doesn't really know too much about all this football hoopla and things like that. So his coaches are helping him through the process and trying to make sure he makes the decision he feels best about this time around. And at this point, we feel like it's got a chance to be LSU. Obviously, Arkansas will do everything they can to keep him at home. And, you know, maybe down the line, if a coaching change happens there, then maybe they find maybe a little bit better footing next time around. But at this point, we really like where LSU stands. They've done a really nice job here. Brad Davis has really done a good job of, you know, making him feel at home, making him feel like a member of the family. And I think that carries the day here. Not to make too much of a pun there, but I think LSU will get good news on Thursday.
Amazing. I mean, the way that they recruited this offensive line is incredible to think about where they were.
And Carius is freaky too. We've heard some stories from his coaches that he hasn't really done too much as far as, speed training and doing all those things to get ready to run at camps and do the drills. And he still dropped some, I think he ran like a 4.8 something at one camp and then a 4.3 shuttle. Arkansas, I believe, actually had him committed as a defensive lineman early on. So not to open that can of worms, but Brad Davis will be winning that battle if he does get him. But he's a terrific athlete. He's got a lot of upside.
All right, Bill, some news yesterday that shook up the recruiting world. Bell, the quarterback out of American Heritage out of Florida, committed to Sark and University of Texas. He was high on LSU's board as far as a signal caller in 2026. What was it about the Horns?
Yeah, I think for Bell, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what made him, pick Texas. I mean, Texas has a lot to offer in terms of playing for Sark in that offense, and they're certainly on a heater in recruiting, and they've got a lot going for themselves right now, just the way things are setting up for them. So there is that aspect of it, but with 2026, LSU is going to have. I think Joe Sloan will find a way to get a highly touted quarterback in at LSU. That's just what he deserves to kind of, be expected of him, just with the way he's been recruiting the position. He's always had LSU in it for highly touted guys, but you are bringing in Bryce Underwood, and so a lot of quarterbacks will know that you are probably going to have to wait just a little bit, even if you really consider yourself an alpha and you can beat out anyone, which is a great mindset to have, of course. But Bryce Underwood's coming to LSU, and so I think for LSU, they had Faison Brandon, who is the number one quarterback in the country on campus this past weekend, so they got a chance to really sit down with him and talk more and continue to grow the bond there. And so we'll see if LSU can come away with him. And they've dished out some other 2026 offers lately. But, I feel like he had a good time visiting LSU. He likes the program. There's no doubt about that. But I think just with how the quarterback room at LSU is kind of stacking up, it was hard for me to see LSU coming away with him in the end. So a little surprised he commits this early, but he is the son of a pro, son of Raja Bell. And so maybe they just wanted to go ahead and focus on what's next and, playing for, the next 2 years at Heritage and going from there.
And one more, you mentioned the DBs that were in town. Jonah Williams, the big 5-star safety, and then Cade Phillips, a big-time defensive back in 2025 cycle, who I know you caught up a little bit. What about that defensive back room and as far as recruiting goes?
Yeah, Jonah Williams is a really big recruiting battle for Blake Baker and Jake Olson. He is really impressive. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Grant Delpit, just in terms of his size and kind of how he could play all over. I mean, some people have really thought he could end up at linebacker, but I just think he could be moved around in a defense. And so that's what really makes him an impressive prospect. He's also a standout on the baseball diamond. I don't know if he's a can't-miss type of baseball prospect. I'm not too tied in there, but he hasn't been talked about to me like that. But LSU would give him the opportunity to play both sports, and so that was a part of the pitch this weekend. And I think LSU put their best foot forward, and Jonah Williams plays for Blake Baker's high school coach, so there are some ties there. But Texas A&M is also heavily involved in this recruitment, and Jonah does go to Mike Williams High School, so that's something to keep an eye. Or Mike Evans High School, so that's something to keep an eye on there, just in terms of the Aggies kind of having a good footing there overall. But nonetheless, LSU did a really nice job, putting their best foot forward, and we'll see if they can land him. And then one guy I think LSU's probably more of a sleeper for than they get credit for is Cade Phillips. He's a Texas prospect who Texas is really high on. Texas A&M is heavily involved for as well, and LSU is recruiting him at corner, and I believe they're the only school recruiting him at corner, and I think that stands out to him. And he's got a good bond with Corey Raymond. He's made a couple visits now, And it wouldn't shock me if LSU pulled that one off. They've still got to survive a Texas official visit this weekend, but they've done some really nice work there, and Cade is very high on the Tigers, so we'll see if they can kind of surprise some people there.
We hear so much about these camps going into the summer, Bill. Now that LSU's elite camps are in the rearview mirror, did they get the most out of them?
Yeah, they got one more on Friday. They got the Friday Night Lights camp that they'll have, so they'll have a chance to bring in some more prospects and see who else wants to camp. I think so. I mean, so much of recruiting is starting to accelerate in terms of the process, and it's almost like if you don't end up offering in April, May, when you go and see prospects on their campuses, or really start picking up interest in January, and maybe it leads to an offer, your board is stacked so that you're bringing in official visitors, you're starting to land commitments in May and June and into July, that the camps aren't overblown. But for seniors, I mean, they're trying to get their spots at whatever schools have offered. So taking Aiden Anding, for example, he's out of Ruston High. LSU's been to his high school. They've seen what he's done on Friday nights, but they haven't offered yet. And he was one that we really thought was going to camp. And I mean, he has a chance to come in on Friday if he wants to. I'm not sure if he has an official visit somewhere planned this weekend. He might be going to Texas. Texas is high on his list. But if he doesn't camp, it would probably be a move it to a senior evaluation kind of deal for Corey Raymond. But he's one that we really thought LSU would pull the trigger on an offer, but he just hasn't camped because he's been taking visits. So it's the camp season in terms of evaluation is changing a little bit. I think probably every year in terms of seniors, we're seeing less and less. I mean, Chase Thomas, the Destrehan athlete, picked up his offer from camp, and that was a well-deserved one. And some, been hoping for that one for a while, including Chase. So I think he ends up a Tiger and a nice addition to the safety room at some point whenever he wants to decide. But yeah, the camps are almost starting to trend more towards get the 26s or the sophomores and juniors, soon to be sophomores and juniors on campus. Let them camp, get them around the coaches, let them see how they coach, get them to campus, do it in a kind of casual setting, and then go from there. And that way they've mixed in a visit as well as, working with the coaches, and they have an idea of what their style is and things like that earlier in their recruitments. And we've seen some offers go out from strong camp showing. So camps have changed in terms of how they do them for sure. And just kind of, I mean, the amount of guys that come out and compete too. I mean, ever since COVID, it went from, seeing Stingley and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Christian Fulton line up against each other in camp, and there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 matchups of that kind of caliber to, I mean, we're seeing, a handful of, true Power 5 dudes as seniors show up in camp on each side of the ball at every camp. So it's just kind of changed. And that's because mainly recruiting has been accelerated for guys, and they're farther down their process as seniors when camps roll around. But LSU's done a good job of getting a lot out of these camps at the same time too.
DK Moore's younger brother will be a legend in my eyes forever. Do I have anything to worry about with Keelan Moses? I saw him and his younger brother at A&M this weekend, and I know Emmanuel Moses is going to be a big-time player, and I saw them in College Station. Anything to worry there?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think Texas A&M has done a good job recruiting him. Their linebackers coach, I think he was recruiting him. Bateman was recruiting him at Florida. And so they have a long-standing relationship. He's going to go out to Oregon this weekend as well and check them out. From what he's kind of told us is, just wanting to take some trips and go through the process, and obviously get his brother around some of these programs as well, and do it on, a college's dime. And Keelan committed so early, he probably is feeling a little bit like, oh, my friends are taking visits, or I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, because you can't take photo shoots as on unofficial visits either. So it's not like he could have just, swung through some campuses and done that because of the rule change. So he's probably feeling like he missed out a little bit on some of the things. So he's taking some visits, and at the same time, those schools are recruiting him. They are pushing for him, and we'll see where it goes. But LSU has done a really good job to get him on board early. They prioritized him early on, and I do feel like he ends up at LSU, and I would be surprised if he doesn't. He's just been such a leader in this class, and I just think he's going through I don't want to say he's like in his feels, but he wants to experience what some of his classmates are, and that's when you commit that early, you run the risk of maybe not experiencing some of that. Kind of the same deal with Jabari Antoine. I don't feel too worried about it. They're just things to watch right now. I mean, recruiting is really different now, just with how kids prioritize things and how the whole process is being played out overall. But those are two I feel good about LSU hanging on to. At this point, I would be surprised if they went elsewhere. They're having their fun, but I think the staff would expect them come July to, really lock in and not take any more visits and show up somewhere at the end of July. That would be, if they show up somewhere at the end of July, that would be something where I think the staff would be like, okay, you're starting to play some games. We'll start recruiting other people too.
LSU have any chance on DK Moore, you think, after these last 2 weeks?
In the same breath as Keelan Moses surprising me that he wouldn't be at LSU, it would really surprise me if DK Moore ends up at LSU. I think Texas and Ohio State are probably battling it out there, and I'd probably give the edge to the Longhorns. Just don't see him going that far from home up to Columbus, but LSU they did a good job recruiting him. That push from Texas is pretty serious, and I would imagine he ends up there in the end, but never say never. I mean, he does love him some LSU, so we'll see if they can kind of shock a lot of people around DFW and reel him back in. But him talking with Jamar Chase right before the visit, and continuing to talk with Cortez Hankton, Frank Wilson picked up the ball a little bit more on the visit as well with his mom, and they did everything they can, I think, to really make him feel at home. But again, I think Texas is probably the pick there.
Good luck this morning at the dentist, Bill. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, guys.